Alright folks, we'll just wait another couple of minutes for some late minute people to join. I see someone's actually dialed in. I'm assuming that's Wayne as your client. Just right back in the chat window if that is you or not. That's well, thanks dialing in. So we'll just wait another minute or so for any latecomers to join, and then we'll begin. In the meantime, while we wait, if I could actually just ask you to just fill out this survey. I'll bring up on the screen. So thank you for that input on whether you've been using Windows 10 or not. So what we'll be talking about is obviously an overview of Windows 10, and also talking about there's a proof of concept offer that Microsoft's running that you may be eligible for. So what our agenda is, we'll cover what's, what is Windows 10 in a nutshell, and as well as what the user experience looks like, especially for those people who haven't gone to Windows 8 or have held off. We'll talk about the compatibility in the software side of things, the integration with cloud services such as Azure Active Directory, how you can actually manage Windows 10 using mobile device management. And as well, with the demo, what I've actually done is I've actually got a pre-canned one because I thought we didn't want to be sitting there and watching the hourglass or the spin thing go while we wait. So I've actually taken screenshots this morning of what that demonstration would have been. And then we'll go over the proof of concept offer. So a bit about myself. My name's Lorian Strand. I'm an Office 365 MVP and the Managing Director of Paradigm. We actually specialize in cloud services. And while historically have been synonymous with Windows 10 or Windows, Windows 10 is now more integrated into the cloud services that we provide for customers than previous iterations of Windows. So something that's very close to us now. So without that, look, I guess the key thing to why you should actually bother about Windows 10, hence the title of it, and why you would care, is that it's the same experience, the same user interface across any device. So whether you're using it on a mobile device, using it on a small tablet, whether you're using it on a laptop or even a full-size desktop, it's the same experience, the same the same form factor, I guess, in terms of user interface, regardless of what you're actually doing. What it also allows you to do is to have multiple inputs, someone keeps exiting and coming back in. Multiple different inputs, be it keyboard, touch, pen, multi-touch, all those kind of things. So really what Microsoft has been pushing for over the past year or two of the development of Windows 10, and we'll see this kind of culminate with when Windows 10 Mobile comes out to replace Windows Phone 8.1, is that you can take a single login to a single Windows 10 device and use that as your PC. You can use it as your phone. There's features something called Continuum, which is where you can actually plug a mobile phone into a docking station and it turns into a full PC. Where features like Cortana Cross and all those kind of things. So as we're also seeing, is Windows 10 will be powering Xbox shortly, and one of the features from on a personal level is that you can actually stream Xbox One games to your Windows 10 device. So for example, in my situation, we just have the one TV where the Xbox is plugged in, and if my daughter wants to watch Octonauts or any other TV show for that matter, or she's having a sing-along to YouTube music videos, I can actually stream games to my Surface Pro 3 running Windows 10 in another room and continue playing my games. So one of the things that's been different about this, as we saw with Windows 8, is that, and really probably the advent of the Surface Pro, was that it challenged the form factors that we had historically from a device perspective, because it was really quite a stale experience. You basically just had a tablet. A laptop. That was the most you could get. We tried things like netbooks. We tried a few things, with flip screens and those kind of things. But they didn't really take off. I myself, I had a Lenovo X201 tablet. I've still got it. It's about 5 years old. Still works quite well. And effectively, it was a touch screen that was also a swivel screen, so I could use it as a tablet, or I could use it as a laptop. But it was still about 1.5 kilos, not including power supply. So it's still a bit of a heavy device, and the battery life wasn't exactly fantastic. So it wasn't the kind of thing that you could just, slip in under your arm and walk around it all day. So what we saw was with the Surface Pro 1 that came out, challenged, manufacturers like Dell and HP and Acer and Lenovo to innovate. And now with things like the Pro 3 and soon the Pro 4, we're seeing a lot more of, kind of choose your own adventure when it comes to device. If you want to use touch, then you can get a touch device. If you want to use, something that's more of a tablet with a bit of touch, then you've got things as you can see on the right, like the Lenovo Yoga. One of the things, for example, I found is in my own family, I have a Surface Pro 3, which is fantastic. My wife has a Surface Pro 2, but she actually enjoys doing a lot of work from the couch and from the bed. And if you've ever seen a Surface, the keyboard is not really designed for sitting on your lap. So she'll probably get something like a Lenovo Yoga afterwards. So where Windows 10 really comes into that is whether you like the start menu or the start screen. You can choose that. You can use a pen. You can use touch. You can use all of it in one. We'll talk through more of that shortly. So as I was saying before, that familiar experience that you have, be it on a laptop, desktop, or mobile. Obviously, with Windows 8, Microsoft tried to really shake things up and move to a touch interface and just have an entire start screen instead of a start menu. As realistically, that was what was kind of being driven by the rest of the world with the mobile experience. That's what people were using. More people were consuming service on the mobile, so Microsoft tried to make its desktop experience match that. Obviously, that didn't really go down well. And so with Windows 10, what we have now is, as I was saying, you can still have the start menu and the start desktop, if that's what you prefer, or you can have a start screen. So, as I was saying before, choose your own adventure. You can have it however you like, depending on the form factor. And it just makes it easier for people who are on Windows 7 moving to Windows 10, Windows 8 moving to Windows 10, and I'll show through what that looks like shortly. Realistically, whether you're a consumer, whether you're a business user, this is built for the new era of mobility and cloud services where you can work from anywhere at any time. So from a fast boot we saw with Windows 8 where the boot up sequence took approximately 8 seconds if you had the right hardware. And the right hardware was not exactly expensive hardware, just solid state drive and a decent performance. With Windows 10 we're seeing closer to more 6 seconds. So, and the sleep time is restored within about a second. So it's really designed to kind of work as a full desktop experience or a full business experience, but with, I guess, iPad or Android-esque style responsiveness and speed, as well as battery life. So we're seeing with the advances in Intel chipsets that, we have things like a Surface Pro 3 is now supposed to last approximately 6 hours of average use. But there are some devices that are lasting even longer, and we'll see that with the next chipsets that they'll probably last closer to 12 hours. As I was saying, Continuum, I don't have a demo for that because it's more of a mobile thing rather than a desktop thing. But the aim with things like Continuum is instead of necessarily kitting out people with a phone and a tablet or a computer, you can just give them the phone that turns into the computer. So for mobile workers who don't necessarily need a dedicated device, they just have the one device being their mobile, and you can give them, a larger screen, and things like a Bluetooth keyboard, so that phone is also their computer. And when they plug into, let's say, a base office, they come plug into a dock, they've got the full screen, full desktop experience. So from a user experience perspective, this is a screenshot of a computer running Windows 7 with Office 2013 installed. The background you're seeing is actually the Commons at Microsoft Redmond. So if we have a look at, the Windows 10 experience is pretty much the same. other than the start menu, the tray bar has actually changed a little bit, and you can customize that. So, for example, where it says in the bottom left, search the web and Windows, you can actually collapse that so it doesn't actually take up that much real estate at all. So, from a start screen perspective, this is what the new start menu looks like. So, very similar to the old Windows 7 style of start menu, but effectively more colorful. So kind of absorbing some of the interface changes of what Windows 8 brought, and bringing that into Windows 10 now. So you have the best of both worlds. My personal preference, as you can see in the top right corner there is an arrow that allows you to take it to full screen mode, and that's the mode that I actually prefer to live in because I actually did quite like Windows 8 and 8.1, so I like that full screen experience. But the reality for me personally is I actually haven't used the start menu itself since Windows 7. Ever since I had the ability to press the start button on my keyboard and type in the application that I wanted, I haven't actually browsed the start menu. So I don't care how many apps are installed on my start menu, how messy it is, what order they're in. I actually just honestly don't care, and I haven't for quite some time. And that's quite a bit of a shift for some people to get their head around. And not everybody's like that. So that's why some people prefer that start menu experience, whereas I prefer the start screen because I've got a Surface Pro 3, so when I'm on my desktop, I hit the start menu, and type in what I want, whereas when I'm in tablet mode, I like to press the start button on the physical Surface device and actually, look at large live tiles and see, current information on them, like news and weather and those kind of things, recent blog articles, whatever it might be. Another big thing with Windows 10 is something called Universal Apps. Now, Universal Apps are if we look at, I guess, the current ecosystem of not just Microsoft but also devices globally, we've got in Apple we've got iOS apps and we've got apps that run on Mac OS X. Now Apple is working to bring those together. Similarly, we've got Android apps, and then there's add-ins to Google Chrome. In the Microsoft world, it's a lot more fragmented. We've got 32-bit applications that run in a desktop. We've got mobile apps, and we've got modern apps, or as they were called at the start of Windows 8, Metro apps that run in kind of a full screen experience. So what we're saying now is with universal apps, they are the same app regardless of mobile, tablet, or desktop experience. So, for example, things like Groove Music, formerly known as Xbox Music. That looks one way on my phone. When I open it on my Surface Pro 3, it looks the same way, just on a bigger screen, so I can see more. I've got more real estate to work with. And that's in desktop mode, so it's not occupying my full screen. It's just showing up, as kind of like a normal Windows 32-bit application, but the bigger buttons and all those kind of things. But if I want to, I can expand that out to take up the full screen. And use touch. So you've really got a whole, choice of how you want to interact, and it's the same app. So as opposed to previously with Windows 8 and Windows Phone, where we had different apps, different platforms, and different experiences, now it's kind of the one app. Choose your own platform, choose your own experience. So it's really up to the individual user. And this will also extend across to the Xbox as well when that's upgraded to run off Windows 10. You've got that one app, so you don't have to necessarily write applications for a mobile device or for the Xbox or for Windows 10. You just write a universal app, and it works on all of them. Office is a big thing. We've seen that in a touch mobile experience on iOS. It's been available in preview on Windows 10 mobile as well as Windows 10 itself. It's actually now available and free to install. And effectively, you still have the desktop experience of Office. So if you want to use Office 2013 or soon to be released Office 2016, you still have that full rich desktop experience, which actually can work. Has a touch mode built into it. But if you want to just use the touch-friendly apps, and again, you can use it from a desktop, you've just got the universal Office apps. So they will look and work exactly the same way on a Windows 10 device as a Windows phone, and they're matching and mimicking what they do on Android and iOS. So what that means is that a user can switch entire device ecosystems and still use the same Office-rich functionality. Myself personally, I've been on Windows Phone for quite some time. I actually got an iPhone over the weekend, as at this point the apps are better. The Microsoft apps are better on iOS than they are on Windows itself, and that is changing, so I'll be switching back soon. But yeah, what I found is loading Office, it worked exactly the same way it does on my Windows 10 app. So what we're seeing is with the mail and calendar apps, historically they've been standalone, whereas now they're more like an Outlook mobile experience. So it's all kind of coming together instead of having instead of having fragmented applications, we're now seeing the one consolidated ecosystem from Microsoft. Internet Explorer is still in Windows 10 as Internet Explorer 11, but it's there generally for more. It still works for websites. It still supports ActiveX and JavaScript and all those kind of things, and it's still very secure. But it is more designed for legacy applications and legacy web services. Whereas what we have is the new Edge browser, which benchmarks have actually shown to be faster than Chrome. And that is designed for the new web experience. Windows 10 Mobile will also have Edge built into it, so you can carry your browsing experience from device to device. The other thing as well is that it has Cortana, which is Microsoft's personal assistant, built into it as well, and the ability to actually ink. So if you have a device that supports inking with a stylus, you can actually write it on your screen and share that page or bookmark that page, so that when you go to that page later, it's got your notes on it, which is a fantastic experience. And again, that crosses between mobile devices as well as desktop devices, as we'll also see with Cortana. So kind of beating where Siri and Google now are, is that Cortana is going across all the devices and all the applications. So from an application and device compatibility perspective, the hardware requirements, as you can see there, haven't changed from Windows 8.1, so you can quite safely upgrade over the top of Windows 8.1 or even Windows 7, and things will still work. From a Windows 32-bit application perspective, as we've seen with many customers so far who have done upgrades, it continues to work. All Windows Store apps continue to work. So you've really got you've really got to get choices of whether you want to upgrade or do a fresh deployment. But you can effectively upgrade now in full comfort and knowledge that you will still be able to run those applications that you've already invested in and deployed. So what we do have is the option now to, again, consider what your deployment approach is. So as you can see there, if you're running Windows XP, well, that's out of date, no longer supported. That operating system is over a decade old. So, the recommendation would be wipe and start again. Don't actually upgrade what's not supported. Windows 7, you can choose whether you want to upgrade or start afresh with new devices. Similar with Windows 8 and 8.1. So what we see is with 8.1 is you can quite simply upgrade over the top, and that's actually a free upgrade. Whereas with Windows 7 and 8, there's more steps you have to go through in order to get there. So what we do have is different deployment choices as you go down the Windows 10 journey. There's the wipe and load, which is effectively take all your data and settings, wipe the machine, and start afresh. I guess from a technical perspective, that's always the recommended approach, because you don't have any of the legacy artifacts from the old operating system and installation. However, that being said, I've seen it done, and including myself, on numerous upgrades from Windows 8.1 to Windows 10, and it continues working better than it used to. So that's where we can do the in-place upgrade and preserve all the data. So that way, from a user perspective, they don't have to go through the pain of saving passwords and putting settings back in. Or, to be honest, I think that the best approach is the provisioning, and I'll talk through more of that in a sec. But effectively, that means where, especially if you're doing new devices, you don't have to do the in-place upgrade, go straight to Windows 10. Effectively, provisioning is the wipe and load, but there's a lot more built around it for kind of a bring your own device type model. So what we're heading to is the future of provisioning. So historically and currently, actually, for organizations that have fleets of Windows devices, they would generally have things like System Center Configuration Manager or Altiris or something else that does the image or the SOE management of those devices. And what you would also have is generally stock of equipment standing by. If that's not actually provided by the organization, it might be provided by a fulfillment organization such as Staples, um, who actually keep hot standbys and ship those out. But realistically, with this new model with Windows 10 of provisioning instead of re-imaging, what we find is that effectively the journey becomes quite different. The user can go into JB Hi-Fi, Harvey Norman, Officeworks, wherever, purchase any device off the shelf. Basically, as soon as they sign in, it will apply a provisioning package and say, hey, I know this device. You've enrolled in the organization, and it will push all the applications and settings down to it, and the device is ready to use. What this means is that if you have a new employee starting the organization or faulty hardware that needs to be replaced, these users can be up and running in a very short period of time from opening the shrink wrap box. It all comes down to, I guess, speed of internet connectivity and those kind of things. But if you had a very base configuration with things like group policies and Office and maybe one or two other apps, it's not a stretch to actually have that user up and running within 30 minutes and a zero IT touch. So all they have to do is connect the device to a network, be it wired or wireless, whatever they do, and obviously follow the prompts as they do the fresh installation. It will basically, and I'll show you what that looks like shortly, but all they've got to do is just type in their corporate credentials after they've connected to Wi-Fi and sit back, and everything else will be done for them. So with Windows 10, there's a lot of controls that organizations have over what that looks like, and you can choose that first run experience, how many prompts you give them. You can enroll them into the mobile device management out of the box. You can control whether they have the ability to upgrade to other editions. You can control what policies get applied, certificates get pushed out for things like VPNs, offline content they've got access to, Wi-Fi connectivity, and what start menu experience they have. So perhaps you've done a poll within your organization and decided we would like the desktop. So that is what you push out is a desktop experience with start menu. Great. That way people don't have to move from the Windows 7 experience that they're familiar with. So they can move into Windows 10 and kind of go, oh, same but different. Or you can say, right, we're rolling out touch devices. So this particular fleet here are getting the start screen. So from an identity perspective, we've got things like you can choose if it's an organization-owned device to enroll it and connect it into traditional Active Directory, or actually enroll it into an Azure Active Directory. So obviously if we're enrolling it into an Active Directory, it needs to be connected to the corporate network in order to find the machines, or we can just connect it to Azure Active Directory. So if you've already got Office 365 or Intune, then you're partially set up for these things, and effectively it connects into there. So, for example, with Paradigm, we actually have no Active Directory because we all work remotely. So for us, we have a heavy investment in the configuration of our Azure Active Directory. So new machine comes up, we say it's corporate owned and join it to Active Directory, and from that point, Azure Active Directory, and from that point, we actually control the device and can push applications out to it. Or the other alternative is if it's a BYOD scenario, so it's personal, but you still want to connect it to company resources, then we can still connect it to Active Directory or Azure Active Directory using device registration, even though it's a personal device. So we don't have to provide them with a full company device with company image. We can still connect it to those services, and we've got a lot of control over that. So the Azure Active Directory experience effectively allows an on-premises organization to connect to the cloud and extend their services to that. So what we see is things like Office 365 was really kind of the first mainstream application that sat on top of Azure Active Directory, but now Intune and Azure Active Directory actually stands on its own with over 2,500 applications that it provides single sign-on to. And what it allows you to do is to have a simple connection into that Azure Active Directory and a single sign-on. So it doesn't mean that you have to throw away your existing investment in Active Directory or reconfigure everything and everybody. You can simply extend and add people to it, and instead devices can join that instead of your on-premises Active Directory. The reality is that what we'll see is over time, with this whole cloud-first mantra, that Azure Active Directory will be effectively the point where everything goes instead of having an on-premises Active Directory. And the reason being is that not everything is a Windows device. So Microsoft is making a big bet in having a centralized identity and device management platform because, as we know, Mac OS X can't join a domain, iOS devices can't join a domain, and Android devices can't join a domain. So instead of having them connect to an on-premises Active Directory, instead Azure Active Directory is actually designed for that, and hence Windows 10 also plugs directly into that. So what it also means is that from a lifecycle perspective, if people do bring their own device or company devices, then we simply enroll the device. We've now got inventory of it. We can actually pass down configuration and security information and pass down application settings via group policy, those kind of things. As well as, when that device comes time to be deprovisioned, or it's a BYO device and the person's left the organization, we can unenroll it from Azure Active Directory, which means that all corporate data and applications are then removed from it. So, ultimately, if you haven't already looked at Azure Active Directory or done anything with it beyond Office 365 or haven't even done that, that is the first step. The best Windows 10 experience is going to be from having that cloud-ready experience, not just connecting to an on-premises Active Directory. So setting up Azure Active Directory and factoring in things like mobile device management. Now, Intune has historically not been a great solution because it's been very slow to iterate, and it's largely been reliant on System Center Configuration Manager. However, with Azure Active Directory and Windows 10, Intune really comes into its own in that it can manage all mobile OSs as well as Windows 10 devices. And push out applications to them as well. And then we can actually push out things like rights management from Azure Active Directory, or Azure Rights Management, sorry. And the thing is, like I was saying before, with the different user experience, we can also decide the different security and device enrollment experience. You really have that choice. So instead of having to decide on we do not support BYOD devices and do not let them connect, through to we only do that, you can really kind of have a mix and match, and you don't have to have different settings and policies and those kind of things for it. It's effectively through Azure Active Directory as the central point. You can really just have the one set of rules and definitions and have that apply to all different types of devices. One of the new features that's come with Windows 10 is the Business Store. As we saw with Windows 8 and 8.1, there was a store in there, but it required a live ID or Microsoft account in order to install any applications. So from an enterprise perspective, the only way to get around that was to use System Center Configuration Manager or Intune to sideload the applications. So that brought with it a whole bunch of different things, whereas now what we have is a business store that users can sign into with their Azure Active Directory credentials or their Office 365 credentials and have traditional applications, more volume-based applications. So instead of everybody having to purchase their own product as they had to do previously or have it side-loaded, the organization can make a volume purchase on their behalf, and those applications can actually be pushed down through that business store. One of the things that's also coming is the ability to wrap 32-bit applications into a quote modern application, so you'll be able to push those out through the business store as well. So before I jump into the pre-can demo, any questions at this point? Feel free to just them into the chat window. The expected release date of both Office 2016 and Windows Server 2016 are both under NDA. So unfortunately, I can't tell you what those are. The business store is going to be active within 6 months of release. So before the end of the calendar year is when we expect to be active. However, in the interim, there is the Intune-based company portal, which allows you to do that similar functionality, but it is side loading, as I've said before. So yeah, as we've seen with Windows 10, there's a lot of new functionality. So we're seeing it was key to get everybody out there, get everybody upgraded to it, and then the new features will start rolling out very, very quickly. One of the things, for example, is it's been less than 3 weeks since the release of Windows 10, the release to manufacturing build, and already there is a new build for Windows Insiders. So a lot of these things are coming quite quickly. Any other questions? Actually, the RSAT I think literally got released overnight. I haven't looked in detail, but I did see something about it with RSAT and Windows 10. All right, so what I'll do is I'll show you just through some just through the experience of connecting to Azure Active Directory from Windows 10 instead of traditional Active Directory. So effectively, when you unwrap a brand new machine and connect it to the Wi-Fi or network, whatever it might be, it'll actually ask who owns this PC, and at that point you choose my organization, or I do. And I think that kind of instruction is fairly simple, that even people who don't really get IT can make that choice. That it's not saying corporate or owned or BYOD, it's simple. From that point, and assuming that I've selected my organization, you then choose join Azure AD or join a domain. So at this point, we kind of need to explain to people a little bit about what they need to do there. But to be honest, you're probably looking at a one-page instruction sheet with just a few little bits of text to walk them through some of the choices. So in this instance, I'll select join Azure AD instead of an on-prem AD because this is for a field worker. And as you can see there, the moment I type in my Paradigm credentials, because that's what it's asking for, is my work or school account, you can see that the Paradigm logo is pulled down from Azure Active Directory as well as any text. From there, I put in the password. Now you can, at that point, actually choose to actually have multi-factor authentication enabled, so that if people can't join a device unless they have a second form of authentication, or you can actually. So it has to be done through an administrator. In this instance, I've said simply, anybody can join, but also I'm an administrator. So at that point, it's then saying, do you want to allow this PC to be managed? If you say no, then you won't be able to progress any further. But if you say yes, then the device will effectively be enrolled. And that policy is, or that text you can customize there. Through the Azure Active Directory portal, where basically it says, you choose what information you want to relay to the user, saying, we reserve the right to be able to wipe your device or look at your logins, whatever privacy information you might want to put there, or information just to say, hey, by doing this, you adhere to our corporate standards, those kind of things. So effectively, once that's done, we're enrolled, and then it's setting up our apps. And then we move on to setting a work pin. Now this is done out of the box. It will always ask you to set a work pin. And that's because we're moving to a next generation of authentication and getting beyond passwords, because as much as we can, as much as services like Office 365 can enforce complex passwords, the reality is that if you've got something like the Active Directory synchronization component installed for Azure Active Directory or Office 365, you can actually override that with your own password policy, because Office 365 doesn't know the complexity of the password that's being sent to it because it's hashed. So what that means is you can have no password policy defined on your environment. So people can have a password of the single number 1, and that can be their password. So what we see with Windows 10 is we're moving beyond passwords where we actually have pins. And you might look at it and go, okay, well, a 4-digit pin is not, or is just as easy to crack than a password. So the reality is, yes, there's there's less characters to crack. But that being said, there's been a lot of analysis done, and most people still use dictionary words as their passwords with simply a number at the end of it. So that's a lot easier to crack. So with a PIN, that adds an extra level. You can actually choose whether you want to use picture login, whether you want to use PIN, whether you want to use password, or coming with some of the newer hardware, and you can actually purchase some of that hardware now. There's a feature called Windows Hello, where all you have to do is look at your camera, and it will look at your face. Or there's actually biometric fingerprint scanners. That's not particularly new. That's been around for many years, but now it's built into the operating system. And so where this kind of comes together is that you can really choose what password you want to have, and you can actually enforce multiple of them. My personal recommendation would be avoid picture password. As pretty and simple as it is, it's a lot easier to observe what someone's picture password is and repeat it than a PIN, which can be entered quickly, or a password. Anyway, once we've set our PIN, there we are. We've logged into the desktop. Now, the reality is that entire experience that I showed you actually took all of probably about 6 minutes from start to finish. But, which is actually a very fast experience. Now, obviously, there's no apps pushed out to this particular device when I was doing the screenshots. But that experience is, the reason why I didn't show that live is because we would be sitting here watching things twirl for minutes at a time, or probably more seconds, and I'd have to fill that dead air with awkward chatter. But as you can see here, what I'm signing into is the device using my email, and I'm choosing whether I want to use PIN or password. There's more options there as well. And because it is connected to the Azure Active Directory, and I'll show what that looks like more in a sec, what that means is that anybody else can actually sign in using their Azure Active Directory credentials. So unlike what we had with Windows 8, Windows 8.1, where you're signed in with a live ID and effectively nobody else could sign in unless you actually added them to the computer, this is very simple, similar to traditional on-premises Active Directory, where once it's domain joined, anybody from that domain can sign in. And as you can see here in the screenshot, this machine is connected to the Azure Active Directory, and it's enrolled in the workplace. So because of that, what that actually means is I've got single sign-on capability. So I don't have the screenshot readily available for me, but what it does mean is that any application that's configured for single sign-on, such as Office 365 or anything connected to Azure Active Directory, so if we were using Xero for for our payroll or anything like that, what it means is that all I've got to do is go to that URL, and the browser will know that I am connected to it, so it will simply authenticate me without me having to type in my credentials, because it knows that that is connected to my Windows account. So quite an amazing experience. I've been loving that feature myself. So moving on, what we have is, as I was saying, the Windows 10 proof of concept offer. That's something that we're running for customers, but depending on your relationship with Microsoft, it can potentially be funded. So I'd probably suggest reach out to me after this if that's something of interest to you. But effectively, it's a 3-day engagement. The reality is Microsoft has designed this to be 3 days back to back. The reality is we know that nobody has time to sit there for 3 days focusing on just the one thing. So we've actually adjusted this, and we actually run this over 3 weeks. But you do have to bring your own hardware, and effectively we go through connecting it to Office 365, the differences with Internet Explorer. We run through some labs, we run through how to manage it, run through security, and again we run through some demos. So effectively we're trying to train the trainer here, get some power users for me with Windows 10. And then on the last day is effectively we're creating a strategy for a rollout following a successful proof of concept. So as I said, if you're interested in that, please do reach out to me afterwards. So with that, I guess, any questions? So the question Dustin have there is, we are looking at 75 Windows 10 tablets for our junior primary, how to mandatory profiles and settings for students to operate. But that's probably a bit of a deep dive question, but effectively, the mandatory profiles would effectively be you would push down certain application settings to the users and what their start screen experience might look like, be it start menu or start screen. So that can still be done through things like group policies if they're Active Directory connected, or still group policies but requires a third-party add-on if they're just cloud connected. So yeah, there's different ways. We probably have to talk a little bit more in detail about what you're hoping to do. If they're AD joined, then yeah, you can push out traditional group policies to those devices and still have all the settings as you would with previous versions of Windows. But probably doesn't. I'd probably suggest maybe we take that offline and I understand a little bit more detail what you're hoping to achieve there. The business app stores would not actually be managed through System Center Configuration Manager. They're actually managed through your business store interface. So what that feature will be is effectively it's kind of like an SCCM in the cloud in terms of the application publication. So kind of like Intune is with more controls. So yeah, you'll be managing that through. So even though you may load the devices, if they're coming from the business store, those applications, what you'd probably have, as opposed to it being an image that's sysprepped, as I was saying before, you probably provision a blank machine that's once they connect to the Active Directory or Azure Active Directory, then it pulls everything down as opposed to pre-configuring everything. Thanks for the feedback, Paul. Appreciate that. So the business store apps will require people to at least have an Azure Active Directory login. So effectively Office 365. That's correct. They don't necessarily have to be joined to Azure Active Directory. They just need to be able to sign in to Azure Active Directory. And that's really the key differentiator between the current Windows Store versus the business store, is the current Windows Store still requires you to log in with a live ID, whereas the business store is using your business credentials, your work school credentials. Looks like Dustin's the man with the questions here. Well, no, that's the thing, Dustin. You don't have to log in. No, please don't apologize. Great questions. You don't have to log in. The power of Windows 10 and Azure Active Directory and where Intune comes together is you don't have to do anything. The user just logs into the device and sits back and has everything provisioned to them, applications, settings, all those kind of things. So you can push that down. So you don't. That's the beauty of where they all come together, is creating a zero IT touch experience where everything's configured and pushed out through the cloud. So where you've already got Azure Active Directory Premium, it doesn't give you the complete zero touch. That's where Intune comes into it as the last piece of the puzzle. So Azure Active Directory Premium will allow you to control the device from a security perspective and enforce certain policies, but very little. That's where Intune actually comes in and wraps its mobile device management to do things like conditional access and enforcing pins and device encryption, all those kind of things. But also Intune is the one that actually pushes out the apps itself. So given you, Dustin, are from a school, I would say that you just need the education version. Thanks for the feedback. Any other questions before we kind of wrap it up from there? If not, if you're interested in the proof of concept offer, drop an email to that email address, or if you have any follow-up questions, drop an email to that email address, as that all comes to me anyway. So with that, I say thank you very much for your time, everybody. Really appreciate you coming along. And I look forward to hopefully speaking to you soon and helping you with Windows 10 in your journey.